Have you ever found yourself sitting in your car at a railroad crossing, patiently waiting as one of those mile-long freight trains passes along and I wonder what's in those rail cars and those tankers? I know I've done it. I have one near my house. But thanks to America's energy boom, more trains are hauling crude oil throughout U.S. and Canadian communities. But with this increase comes an unfortunate unintended consequence. According to analysis done by Politico, oil train derailments were once uncommon, but over the last 3 years, they're occurring in record numbers. One of the deadliest derailments ever occurred in Quebec last summer when a runaway train killed 47 people with an explosion that had a blast radius of more than 1 kilometer. It's also happening here in the U.S. with more frequency as trains carry oil from Canada and the Bakken oil fields in Montana and North Dakota to various parts of the country. Now, a major train explosion happened in North Dakota last December. Although it didn't hurt anyone, it caused a massive fireball and 2,400 people had to be evacuated. The latest oil train derailment happened in Lynchburg, Virginia, in April of last year. But thankfully, no one was killed or injured there, but it still caused significant damage to surrounding waterways. Federal government oversight has not kept up with the pace of the growing energy industry, and many are calling for more regulations. For example, the Department of Transportation announced a 40-mile-per-hour speed limit for trains in densely populated areas. But the Association of American Railroads claims most accidents are caused by faulty tracks or equipment, not speed. Others say a better solution might be the Keystone Pipeline. The CEO of TransCanada told Reuters the delay in building the pipeline has them considering rail transport, even though it's more costly and more dangerous. He said, "We are absolutely considering a rail option. Our customers have needed to wait for several years, so we're in discussions now with them over the rail option." Even the State Department estimates an additional 189 injuries and 28 deaths would occur every year if oil meant to be carried by Keystone is carried by trains. Joining us now is Daniel Simmons, the Director of State Affairs at the Institute for Energy Research, where he specializes in energy policy. Thanks for joining us, Daniel.
Thanks for having me.
So it looks here like it's one of those classic examples of unintended consequences. So we've got this great energy oil boom going on in the U.S., but then you have this issue with transportation. And with the delay of the Keystone Pipeline, the incidence of either security or derailment or whatever's going on with the trains, that it's becoming more and more of a problem. So what is the delay? What is the problem with the Keystone Pipeline not finally getting approved? As if it's a safer form of transportation than trains.
Well, exactly, and that's one of the very important takeaways from from these derailments should be that trains are safe, and trains carry about 25% of all chemicals transported in the U.S. According to Union Pacific, 99.9977% of all chemical shipments arrive, safely and without a problem. I mean, that's a very impressive track record. But the reality is, when it comes to transporting oil, pipelines are safer. And so, as you asked, why hasn't the Keystone XL pipeline been approved? And it just comes down to politics, pure and simple. For the president, he doesn't want to approve it just for, honestly, political reasons.
Well, Al Gore seems to think that it's never getting approved. He told Rolling Stone, he said, Obama has signaled that he is likely to reject the absurdly reckless Keystone XL pipeline proposal for the transport of oil from carbon-intensive tar sands to be taken to market through the United States on its way to China, thus effectively limiting their exploitation. That sounds like a lot of jargon to me. In other words, he thinks it should be death by delay.
Well, exactly, and that has been President Obama's strategy so far. I mean, to delay. It's what this administration does when it comes to, any of the use of affordable, reliable energy. When it comes to using, coal, oil, natural gas, any of those, the administration has been, has essentially worked against by delaying being able to use those resources, particularly with oil from Canada. Now, as the head of TransCanada said, they're going to look at transporting the oil by train. If the Keystone XL is ultimately rejected, that oil is still going to get moved. And that's what the State Department found in their environmental impact statement. That oil will be moved. It will be moved by trains or Just this week, Canada also approved looking at, more fully a new pipeline that would run from Alberta to the Pacific coast, to where the oil will then be transported to Asia. So Canada isn't sitting idly by. The oil is going to be produced. The question is, how will it be transported?
Dan, this is SE Cup. Look, I'm in favor of Keystone, but I want to go back to this train business. As Tara reported, train accidents have more than tripled in frequency since 2011. You say train transport is safe, but that's kind of a startling number. I'm wondering, do we know why the train incidents have gotten worse? I'm not in a rush to say trains are derailing, therefore we need Keystone. I think we need Keystone for a lot of reasons, but do we know anything about why the trains are derailing more frequently?
Well, one, I don't necessarily think that trains are derailing more frequently. Trains carrying oil are derailing more frequently, and that is because there's so many more trains that are carrying oil.
So it's just a volume thing.
So I think it's just a volume thing. I mean, in the past, when most of the oil is produced in places where we've been producing oil for a long time, we already have the infrastructure. Now, with places, the Eagle Ford in Texas or the Bakken in North Dakota, there aren't the pipelines there yet. There will be over time pipelines built to transport the oil, but so far, much of that oil is being transported by train, and as a result, I think it's just a volume numbers game.
Gotcha. Okay.
And actually, we have a map to show that it's not just in those areas. It actually is nationwide. I think we have that map. We can put it up there. That the oil train accidents and incidents are happening. They're occurring all over the country, and that's probably that's in line with what Daniel just said.
Daniel used the term infrastructure. I think that's an interesting place to go for just a minute, because the administration is always so in favor of the concept of infrastructure. They talk about we need more infrastructure spending, and they never talk about, by the way, the environmental impact of putting, let's say, billions. Actually, to really update infrastructure in this country would cost hundreds of billions based on what they want to do. But what that would do to the environment, that's never talked about. But here, where you could actually do infrastructure spending on our energy infrastructure, and that would create jobs, that would actually
we don't want
perhaps
that.
lessen the environmental impact of doing all of these other things. And, but it just shows you how deeply ingrained this is in their ideology. Yeah. This is not of political benefit to them. Mary Landrieu was like, Keystone's great, I swear, whatever she has to do to get elected. But the Democratic Party still is pretending like this isn't an obvious play. They're waiting until after the election.
They want that $100 million from Tom Steyer.
That's right.
Tom Steyer still makes his money with investments in fossil fuels.
It's because they don't want to invest infrastructure into anything that upsets the Tom Steyers of the world that are environmentalists.
And the special interest groups that are pushing on the president. You don't put in the Keystone Pipeline, we'll continue to back you. The minute you do, we're going to come after you publicly, and that's what's going on
That's
here.
absolutely right. The Sierra Club, they said that the rising damage toll should ring alarm bells in the minds of our decision makers, from cities all the way up to Congress and the president. So, the environmental groups are out there. Chuck Schumer, Senator Schumer, he said the boom in domestic oil production has turned many railways and small communities across our country into de facto oil pipelines. And the gold rush type phenomenon has unfortunately put our regulators behind the 8 ball. So, of course, they're looking to push for more and more regulation.
It's amazing to all of these politicians, they kind of, on the Democratic side, they hate fossil fuel until they recognize that, for example, a crisis in the Middle East would spike prices and there would be an immediate, and then all of a sudden they like fossil fuels.
Yeah.
In concept, they don't like these things, but when there's actually a shortage or a problem, they recognize our economy is completely dependent still upon those trains with that oil getting out into places.
What are we looking at? You mentioned that the Keystone Pipeline is dying by delay.
Yeah.
This was first presented to Obama in what? In
2008.
2008?
2008, they've been waiting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's been sitting on the vine for 5-6 years.
Despite the number of environmental
Go
issues.
back to Anwar, when the first Democratic senators were saying, you know what, that's going to take 10 years. We can't wait. That was 14 years ago.
Yep.
14 years ago. And look how much oil we could have had by now.
Daniel, really quickly, the domestic oil boom here, with what's going on in other parts of the world like the Middle East, has somewhat seemed to keep prices down. Is that true? That now this is a practical, real-world example of where our domestic energy boom is actually having an effect on oil prices and keeping gas prices down here in the U.S. Is that accurate?
That is 100% accurate, and that's not me. That was in a report recently from the Energy Information Administration that is a part of President Obama's Department of Energy. The more oil we produce, the more oil that comes from safe, secure parts of the world, it means the less we have to rely on the Middle East and all those problems.
Well, God forbid that we actually did something that creates jobs in this country, keeps us less dependent on foreign oil. Why would the president ever not want to support something like that? Daniel, thanks so much for your insight tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Misfit Stories are up next.